We are going to be uploading this video to YouTube as well. So for those that sent me messages and were unable to attend tonight, you'll still get a chance to hear the story at a later date and time. So we had left off with our main character, Carter, was on the run and had just caught the train, escaping Uncle Sly, who had tricked Miss Zaleski and tried to steal her necklace, which was the breaking point for our main character, Carter. And he is trying to start off on a new life with magic. So let's find out what happens in chapter 3 of the Magical Misfits. Many hours after hopping onto the multicolored train, Carter woke to find that he had already stopped. Panicked, he gathered his belongings. Experience told him that a conductor or a cop would eventually go from train car to train car looking for extra passengers. It wasn't best if he was caught. He didn't want to end up in the foster home, or worse, reunited with his Uncle Sly. He cracked open the metal door to see where fate had taken him. Outside, a lush green forest stretched like a fuzzy rug all the way to a mountain range in the not far distance. The sun had just fallen behind the horizon, turning the few wispy clouds overhead into a lovely fuchsia as the dome of the blue sky darkened into the evening. He'd been asleep for a long time. A sign standing along the nearby road said, "Welcome to Mineral Wells." Carter climbed back up on the ladder to get a better view of the town. From the top of the train car, he could see a quiet community blanketed with twinkling lights that were spread out to the north and the east of the tracks. Far beyond the grid of streets, a sprawling set of buildings sat on a hill overlooking the town. A glow coming from within the windows, as if it was illuminated by the light of a billion fireflies. Closer to the train yard, across the wide gravel lot, and just west of the twinkling town, was an enormous fairground where the bright lights of a traveling circus were just beginning to blink on. The colorful sounds came in waves, even from here. Carter could hear laughter and music and shrieks of excitement. He was about to hop down when a small red car pulled into the gravel lot. Carter ducked, flattening his body against the roof of the train. If it would be bad if anyone reported seeing him. For a moment, Carter thought he was imagining things. People dressed as clowns began to hop out of the tiny red car, one after another, until a dozen different shaped men and women were huddled in a tight group of polka dots and stripes, staring down a lone black train car on his own track. Instead of a smile, each of the clowns wore a painted frown on his or her face. Each had a bag in their hand. Carter shuddered. He was not a fan of clowns. Whenever he'd seen them in advertisements or books, their fake impressions made him think of his uncle. The clowns made their way onto the long train car with a giant man's face painted on the side, big and round, as if it might pop off the wall and roll out like a runaway boulder. The face held a creepy smile. Either that or it was a smirkingly, dastardly grin. Over his head were the 5 letters that spelled Basso. The first clown unlocked the door of the train car. The rest began to load the bags inside the metal car. From this angle, Carter couldn't see inside. He wasn't sure what they were carrying, but he had a feeling it wasn't something good. He knew the body language of someone who felt guilty. Their shoulders were hunched and they moved jerkily, as if they were about to jump out of their skin. "There's no more room," one of the clowns whined. "What do we do now?" "Up to the boss man," another clown said. "He'll probably want to move most of the goods over to the Grand Oak Resort. Let's bolt before the coppers show." Carter wondered if the gloriously lit buildings on the far hills were the resort they were talking about. The compound certainly looked grand. Before he knew it, all of the frown clowns had squeezed into their impossibly small cars and driven away. Carter didn't know what that was about, and honestly, he didn't care. One thing he'd learned growing up on the street was to mind his own business. What did he care about the police showing up? So Carter climbed down from the roof and made his way across the gravel parking lot toward the manic carnival lights, where he knew he could blend into the crowds. When Uncle Sly had dragged Carter into a new town, they always followed a strict series of rules. First, scope the surroundings. Second, find food. Third, a bed. Finally, Uncle Sly would seek out some victims so that he could get to work as soon as possible. As a violent rumble shook his stomach, these rules flew out of Carter's mind. Miss Zaleski's grilled cheese and radish sandwich was the last food he'd eaten, and painful hunger pangs were making him suddenly dizzy. The breeze carried scents of fried dough and pit barbecue and boiled sweets across the gravel lot, motivating Carter to move forward. When he bent down to check how much of emergency money he had left in his shoe, he gasped in horror. The stash was gone. Memories from yesterday flickered through his brain while film images in a clunky old projector. Had Uncle Sly anticipated that Carter might run away and stolen his stash in advance? Or maybe Carter had gotten so upset about Miss Zaleski's diamond, he'd forgotten to remove his money from his pillowcase and shove it back into his shoe, as he had done every morning since he could remember. Whatever happened, it didn't matter now. He was broke. As Carter approached the source of laughter and music and jovial shrieking, his senses were quickly overwhelmed, which was a good thing. It gave him something to concentrate on other than his empty stomach and his swimmy vision. Bright lights spun around the Ferris wheel and merry-go-round. Stage lights lit the red and white tents. Young couples lined up for cotton candy shows, while children called to their parents for more tickets. Games cried out, "Rat-a-bang-clang and a ding-dong-ding." "We have ourselves a winner," someone shouted with glee. Dozens of other voices said, "Better luck next time." Basso. Welcome to BB Basso's Carnival Spectacular. That was the name on the metal car in the train yard. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit. The clowns in the tiny car were probably dropping off stuff from the carnival. Costumes, wigs, juggling pins, jars filled with leftover ketchup. But why keep the train car so far from the rest of the carnival? It didn't matter. Carter knew the best way to make it to tomorrow was to keep walking. The smell of fried grease grew stronger, and the ground became sticky wherever he stepped. Carter's stomach was roared. The salt and sweet aromas mixing in the air made his mouth water. Something that Uncle Sly said slipped back into his brain. Just wait until your belly rumbles and you're so hungry you can't see. You'll be stealing more than necklaces in no time. What if Uncle Sly had been right? With no money and nothing to eat and a growing sense of desperation, Carter wondered how he'd keep himself from breaking his code that very evening. He could have easily used his talents to acquire some carnival tickets, but he didn't steal, which included tricking people into giving him something for nothing. However, if he fainted, someone might call the cops. Well, one and all, the greatest show on this side of the Appalachian Trail, a sideshow barker echoed through a cone from the top of his podium. The thin man looked like a stick figure, yet his voice boomed like he was a giant. Play games, win prizes, eat food till you're sick. Hear the hysterics within Cuckoo's Funhouse. Get lost in the mind-bending maze of mirrors. Shudder in the shadows of Basso's blender and the most thrilling thrill ride since the last time you threw up. And make sure you stick around to the end of the night for Basso's grand finale show. Strings of light glimmered overhead. People streamed by Carter, blurping with shouts and laughter. A burly carnival worker in suspenders swung a sledgehammer down on the base of the machine that said, "Test your strength," and a bullet-like capsule shot through and rang the bell. "Step right up," the burly man pointed to the sledgehammer at Carter. "Are you a man or are you a mouse?" "Neither," said Carter. "Sorry, I don't have any money." He was too embarrassed to tell the burly man how hungry he was. "But maybe I should help you, and I could buy me a corn dog or something." The burly man looked annoyed. He nodded at another man in a stiff-looking dark blue security uniform. As the guard came closer, Carter noticed that his face was painted with one of the frown clowns from the tiny car in the train yard. He was even freakier looking than an ordinary clown. Yikes, thought Carter. Time to vanish again. Seek the sickest sideshows on earth, a woman in an ill-fitting jacket and bowler hat cried from nearby. Wonder at the walrus, a brute who lifts weights with his muscles. Watch the spider lady weave her weirdo web. Feed nails to the tattooed baby. Torment yourself by talking to the two-headed woman. There didn't appear to be any admission fee to this tent, so Carter ducked inside. He followed a group of spectators through a dimly lit gallery lined with glass boxes, a half a chicken, a half a pig, the world's longest fingernail, a Venus flytrap whose bulb was the size of a cracked watermelon. Last was a glass coffin containing the skeleton of a mermaid. As the others oohed in awe, Carter rolled his eyes. All these things were fake. He could see the seam where the chicken and the pig had been joined together, as well as the wood grain on the fingernail and the dried paint on the Venus flytrap. One of the mermaid bones even had a price tag still left on it. A large velvet curtain gave way to another room, this one separated into a series of small stages, one after the other. Carter looked over his shoulder, but he didn't see the security clown following him anymore. Maybe he was safe now? He began to lose himself in the strange surroundings. The first stage featured a plump toddler within a diaper whose skin was covered in tattoos. He sat in the middle of an enormous wooden playpen, giggling and drooling and banging some blocks together. When is he going to eat some nails? A spectator near Carter complained. The tattooed baby glared at the man, spit at the ground, and went back to banging blocks harder than ever before. Someone needs a diaper change, Carter whispered to himself. The next stage was black, completely black, except for a giant spidery web strung into the front of the backdrop. On the web lounged a woman with a small pale face and impossibly thin limbs, clad all in black. Carter did a double take when he realized she had 2 extra sets of arms extending from her sides. With a bored look, the spider lady was painting her nails in a fire engine red polish, holding the bottle in her toes and the teeny brush in one of her mid-hands. Thinking of some of his own tricks, Carter looked more closely. The extra arms were covered in sleeves of her black sequins dress, but the hands were bare. The fingers didn't move. It's fake, Carter thought. They're all fake. Since there wasn't an admission fee, technically they weren't breaking Carter's code. Still, it didn't seem fair to the audience. It seemed like something Uncle Fly would be a part of. The next stage held an enormous glass aquarium, several feet wide, several feet long, and taller than the tallest man Carter had ever seen. He thought it was strange that there was no water in it. The glass was filthy and could barely be seen through. As people pushed their faces against it, they screamed or gasped. One woman nearly fainted. When it was Carter's turn, he saw why. Inside sat the 2-headed woman calmly reading a book. The distorted view made her look even more ghastly. Carter spit on his sleeve and wiped away an inch of dirt so he could see better. Of course, the glass is so dirty, Carter thought. The sideshow needs the audience's view to be blurred. Inside, he only saw one neck naturally joined, while the other wobbled awkwardly. The first face moved and blinked while the other stared blankly. It was a mannequin head attached to a real person. More tricks, Carter thought. Part of him was relieved and the other part disappointed. A third part gurgled again with hunger. Carter blushed and then glanced around to see if any of the other spectators had heard him. There was still no sign of security, so he proceeded to the 4th and final display. This stage buckled under the weight of the heavy objects upon it, a diesel engine, an anvil, a refrigerator, and an upward piano. Center staged, a hairy-chested hulk of a man flexed his muscles. His ropey handlebar mustache hung down past his chest. This was the walrus. He squatted in front of the iron bars with what looked like cannonballs on either end, each labeled 500 pounds. The tips of his mustache were tied to the giant weight. With a roar as fierce as a lion, the man struggled to stand, the barbell swinging at his waist. The downward pull on his mustache disfigured his face into a ghoulish grimace. His nostrils flared. Carter couldn't help but laugh. When the man brought the barbell to the ground, Carter saw that the man was staring at him with dark and piercing eyes. Carter headed out of the tent, returned to the night air. He noticed others walking around mystified or horrified or astounded by what they had seen. He managed to smirk to himself. People shouldn't believe everything they see. It's one of the first rules of magic. Carter knew that. Do you? A quick lesson. While showing you one thing, perhaps with a right hand, a magician will often be doing another thing that you don't notice, probably with his left. This is called misdirection. It was one of the first things Carter had learned from Uncle Sly. BB Bosso's two-bit sideshow only reaffirmed Carter's belief that there was no such thing as real magic. Yet at this precise moment, something truly magical happened to Carter that he couldn't explain. Something that would change his life forever. He met Mr. Dante Vernon. And it looks like we're going to learn about Mr. Vernon in chapter 4 next week.